Hello, and welcome to the Dungeon Masters Guildhouse. This is a weekly podcast where I, Matthew Whitby, sit down with people all across the DMsGuild, Adventure League, just all over this. If you're creating content for D&D, chances are I'm going to sit down and chat with you at some point. And I have the pleasure this week to be sitting down with Connor Self. Thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, thank you, Matthew. It's a pleasure, honestly.
I know. Again, how are we doing today?
Actually, it's been really busy. I don't know if viewers can see. I'm sitting in my office. I already had field questions. So over my left shoulder there, that is our school pet. Her name is Yoshi. She resides in the office.
That's a good name.
And it's been a pretty busy day here in the public schools.
I should preface this for people like watching or listening. This is outside of work hours. It's not like it's not like what is it during the start of the day. We're just like, I've got some time.
It is just outside of work hours. I'm going right back to work after I'm done with this. Again, as I kind of said before, even better. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me. But I guess kind of the first question, like jumping straight into the thick of things, then. For the people listening, what sort, how might they have heard of you, or what sort of things are you throwing out to the wind? Okay. I'm a personality at some of the larger conventions here stateside, and I'm very present at a large number of events celebrating Dungeons and Dragons, tabletop gaming in general, largely charity events. I've built quite a reputation for being involved with and supporting charities. The DMsGuild is a little bit of a newer thing for me. I went back to look and see, because I know I've been working conventions pretty much since Dungeons and Dragons came out, but I wanted to go back and check. My first project would have been, it says July 2016 was my first collaboration project.
So that's kind of like just when DMsGuild first started then.
Yeah. But my first actual solo was December of 2018, 2.5 years later.
Okay. So, and I guess I'm curious then. So, what was it? What was your first foray? What were you posting up in 2016?
So, I had collaborated with other folks in the Adventurers League on optional dark gifts that people could earn in Curse of Strahd.
I must admit, I do like the dark gifts. Is in the same way that I like the sort of patrons and boons. It is an interesting system that I don't think gets enough love at most tables.
Yeah, absolutely, and building those character experiences that aren't necessarily hinging entirely on combat. It adds a certain degree of realism and quality to a story, certainly.
And no, it's fascinating, especially being again like in the sort of D&D convention scene for kind of so long. I take it you've kind of seen the kind of growth and change of like Adventure League over time.
It's been amazing. It's been an amazing experience from the very beginning. The first event I want to say I helped with would have been not Gary Con. It would have been Gamehole Con 2. And it was a room with 12 tables in it. And I remember running Spore Dome over and over and over, from, which was a fun little romp in the Underdark. It was 12 tables, and we thought that was really something else. The last year, we were wrangling 100 tables all at the same time at that event. It's grown exponentially, and not only in size but also in diversity, which is just great to see.
So I guess one of my first questions then is, so what kind of encouraged you to take the dip? And I believe, what was it? So a lot of the adventures you kind of publish have been through the CCC.
Mm-hmm.
What was the like instigating event? What was like, I've been running these like convention adventures for a little while now. I think I've got enough sort of knowledge to throw one together myself.
Well, so our first idea, I worked on our first idea with a friend of mine, Eric Weberg. We were coincidentally hanging out at a Gamehole Con event, and we were having beer, and it was a Sunday.
Yep.
And so we're just sitting at the gaming table, not getting much gaming done, but just chatting about stuff that we like and getting loud. And we both found out we had a passion for fairy tales, a shared passion for fairy tales. And I can't even remember who said it, but it was something along the lines of, "Hey, we don't have enough fairy tales in Dungeons and Dragons. Do you want to write some fairy tales? Yeah, let's do some fairy tales." And so that was just the start of it. Nothing actually materialized from that for a little while. It was just an idea, and at that point. But then when the CCC program came out and the opportunity to write adventures for people to share started really, it started being out there. I said, "Hey, let's actually try to do this. Let's try to tell a story, a fairy tale set in D&D." And so that's what we did. That started a storyline of 6 adventures that we just wrapped up this last year.
So basically, is this the at Jenny's request? It's because I knew that was a campaign. I didn't know it was 6 in total. I thought it was, wow.
Yeah, so it was at Jenny's request. It's a series of 6 stories with 2 tangential stories. So if you wanted to run it as a whole campaign, you could run it as a campaign from like levels 3 or 4 up to 10. It takes a deep dive into Realms lore and into the active story events that have been going on in Dungeons and Dragons for many years now.
So I guess so was the obviously integrating fairy tales into like obviously D&D. Were you thinking like, okay, well let's take established fairy tales, or what would the natural fairy tales emergent in the Forgotten Realms be? Which sort of angle did you go from?
So there were certain stories that resonated, I think, with us a little bit more than others, and so we left it up to what seemed to be best at the time, and it floats between the fantastical and the absurd.
Nice.
And so there's a lot of stories that we really took inspiration from. Alice in Wonderland.
Oh yeah.
I worked its way in quite a few times as inspiration for different scenes. The story of Baba Yaga.
Yeah, I mean, fairy tales, it's like, depending on the certain depiction, some of them get pretty dark real quick, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And so these stories, they're not always the brightest stories. And you know, I try to work in some of the darkness that you see in your Grimm's fairy tales, where you know the forces that you're dealing with, when they're having a bad day, they're having a really bad day. When they're having a good day, it also could very much be a bad day for you.
Yeah.
But just the whimsy and the fantasy and the moral underpinnings, the life lessons that they try to teach, the way that it deals with NPCs, the expansion of NPCs and what could qualify as an NPC in a fairy tale. It expands from simply just people that you would deal with to the setting, the plants, the mood is its own NPC. Animals become NPCs, and you empower all of those things to have actual personalities that can impact the story.
So I guess I'm kind of curious then, just because so in the sort of adventures content that I've kind of been writing, they've always been kind of like self-contained one-shots. I've never really thought about bridging together multiple, like a campaign of sorts. Was there any like particular like difficulties, or was it the case of just like it's a series of the self-contained adventures, but with sort of like knowing nods? Or I'm curious about how you navigated the sort of sequel aspect.
Yeah, there's a few ways you can go about that, Matthew. And I've got several friends who have done similar in their stories, but we all have a little bit of a different philosophy. And it was my experience, having talked to people, seeing what they liked, that they wanted stories that were more tightly interwound. Mm-hmm. And so we try to promote the stories as inside of this longer arc. There are several very much interrelated stories, such that even some adventures will drop you at one point in the story where the next story picks it up immediately.
Yeah.
And that's a deliberate design choice. Some folks don't like that. Some folks do prefer very much the one shot with the knowing nod.
Yeah.
At that time, there was a lot of that in Adventurers League, and there wasn't a lot of tightly interwound stories. And so we decided that's the way we wanted to take it.
So I guess my immediate question then is like, okay, so how do you balance the like what the players do in the first part versus coming to part 6? How do you like maintain the sort of like all the consequences and potential like character deaths and like failed missions, like because I imagine always you go like it's the way I can imagine it is you always probably want like forks and bottlenecks. But I don't know. I've never done it. I'm curious.
No, forks and bottlenecks. You open up choices, but then you try to constrict toward the end so that you have a relatively good idea of where the players are going to end up for starting with the next one. Open-ended stories have been a huge part of anything I've worked on from the very beginning. I want to open up as many choices to characters as possible. I want to open up as much ability for DMs to create very specific content for their players, even within the framework of a published organized play story. And so having that wide open, like here's how it goes, that and here's how I tailor it to you, that was important for us. But you need to get it to a certain place if you're going to pick it up in the next. And so we do some bottlenecks. We also used they call them story awards in organized play, and what that is depending on the choices that you make in organized play, you may earn story awards. You would note those with your character record that says, I did this and it might come up later. I did that and it might come up later. And in that last adventure, the one last job, there were somewhere between 12 and 20 story awards that could impact how the players experience that final adventure.
Yeah, so that's what I was thinking. Is like I imagine like it gets to a point where just like the earlier stuff, it's easy and manageable, but as you get further and further on, it's like okay, well, there's again 20 different potential like outcomes.
Yeah, we had to end it just because we wanted to get so big. Anybody? The giant fantasy compilations. Robert Jordan, who I absolutely adore, with the Wheel of Time series, where he's like, oh, it'd be great if I added another character here or there. And then by the time you're 4 or 5 books in and you're going around from person to person, each character might only get 15 or 20 pages in a book of 700 pages. Yeah. And the storylines they became more far-flung, and you just had to do something to bring them together. We didn't want that to happen, right? So at a certain point, we had to say, okay, we're going to need to end the storyline, because otherwise the freedom of choice would make it so that you couldn't get a resolution.
So we spoke a little bit about obviously the inspiration behind this kind of campaign, or like this series. To dig like a little bit deeper, is there like out of these six adventures in particular, is there like a standout encounter or like a NPC or something that just like you just adore, that is like you just like you love this so much?
Oh. Well, I've joked for years and years and years that gay men love hags, and so being able to write for an established D&D persona like Jenny Greenteeth, with her being so deep, with her deep roots in British folklore.
It's I recently for Heroes of the Old World. I wrote a piece about Jenny Greenteeth. She is, so for people listening, she's a river hag who lives lives underwater of like duckweed ponds, which duckweed pond, it covers the surface that makes it look almost solid. So it's the idea that people step on the pond thinking it's solid, and she's like, got ya, and tracks people under.
Yep. Yeah. And sometimes jumps out trees too, if the stories are to be believed. But
yeah,
she pretty much does what she wants.
You gotta be versatile in these current times. you can't be waiting in ponds forever. Sometimes you have to take the hunt to them.
yeah. No, it's very fun to write her. It's very fun to write her because the way that she's envisioned in the tales of Adventurers League is very much. Now you're going to try to make me remember names, and that's where I have difficulty. But there is a person in the story, particularly in the second half when they're adult, and everybody can remember the scene because it's the friendly grandmother that he visits with who offers him cookies.
I must admit, so I haven't read the books or seen the film, so old lady.
Spoilers, minor spoilers, it's terrifying because she's just a little wrong.
Mm-hmm.
She's just a little off, but that little bit of off is what makes her terribly creepy. Until she's totally off, and then the full horror effect happens. And they in those stories they envisioned her, they sort of wrapped her up in that sort of mystique. She's an older woman. She always appears normal-ish. She wears flowery dresses and an apron, but she says and does things that are just wrong. And her eyes, where you would expect them to be warm and comforting, they're cold and full of malice. And it completely twists that impression. It's very fun to write for a person like that. She's the sort of evil that you can understand and might even be able to cooperate with. And so it was fun writing an evil quest giver.
I mean, I think that's always kind of the allure of hags, is because hags as a whole, they're not always explicit like an antagonist. They are much like it's fun to do deals with devils or devils with deals. It's the hag deals are always that sort of like it's not necessarily for your soul, and because of their kind of fey nature, it allows you to they could ask you for something seemingly perfectly innocent, just like go fetch me like a loaf of bread, and they know that this loaf of bread is going to cause the downfall of civilization in one way or another.
Absolutely.
No.
Yeah. Perfect. So that she's a character that I very much enjoy, and so it's nice to be a part of telling that story about her, and we. I hope that what our team of authors and editors did was create a meaningful story where you get to see behind the veil a little bit, even of the Adventures League story, and see that that she's a fully realized persona in and of her own right.
So I get to tap onto that as well. So you mentioned that obviously this started as like essentially a convention socializing, and then you mentioned, so how big did the team grow over the course of the, or was it just the two of you? Editors, artists, how big are we talking?
It got much bigger. The creation of these adventures, it started with just the two of us, but in the last run, I want to say we had, for producing the adventures that would have premiered at the D8 Summit for 2020, it was a team of almost 20 people.
Wow.
Between authors, editors, judges, because of the way we do our blind submission contest. It's a pretty involved team for production of just a few adventures.
I was going to say, I so as someone who's previously submitted into your blind system, I think that is actually a really clever way to go about, again, being coming from a academic background. When you submit to journals, it's typically double blind submissions, so you don't know who's reviewing, you don't know who's sending, and I think it kind of allows the quality of the product to kind of speak for itself, as well as lower the everyone's welcome. It's
right. It's absolutely a double blind. When we So this is separate from at Jenny's request.
Yeah, of course.
The event. The event D8 Summit charity convention. We call it the Iron RPG Author Competition. And what happens is we invite anybody who's interested to submit a 1 hour mini adventure. Those adventures we give a basic theme. And you have to incorporate this theme. It could be love or bread or whatever. It has to make its way into that adventure. We let just a couple guidelines and then say, write us your best. It's double blind submitted. So you would get that adventure, you would email it to the email address with a 4-digit number. The people who are reviewing that only have the 4-digit number to go by, so they don't know who wrote what. You don't know who evaluated your adventure, and we keep that incredibly separate. I actually met Matthew that way.
Yeah, we
checked back and forth. Because Matthew had submitted, and Matthew is the impression I got of Matthew from that, listeners, is he's a knockdown, drag out, just awesome guy who cares about his craft. And you see it in the works that he releases to the DMsGuild. They are exceptional. But you see that because the communication, he says, can you tell me how it judged? Can you let me know ways to improve? And very few people ever do that.
I was to say, you're flattering me too much. You are quickly earning your way to coming back another week.
It's earned. Remember, I'm not going to feed you a line. It's earned. You deserve that. It's nice to see people who take that improvement and that quality, who embody that. But that was the impression I got of you. And so I was just like, wow, he's a really knockdown guy. When my friend and colleague Ginny mentioned you, I said, oh yeah, I remember him quite well, actually. Name comes to mind.
It's funny. It's kind of like how it's like inadvertent networking with just things. And I think at the time of that, I think it was quite early in essentially my career. Of like career, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I don't consider it a career. I don't. Yeah. But my hobby of writing content, and I think it was my first opportunity to try and write within the CCC format. And just as an exercise, I found that to be invaluable, because previously working with my own sort of like using the hardcovers as inspiration for writing like my adventures. It feels almost like night and day between what the template the CCC does and trying to use a hardcover book, because again they're different products. Again, if you're trying to write a one shot, copying a hardcover book which is intended to be a campaign over, it doesn't lend itself as well. So I think like one of the important things that I kind of picked up was what they know sections in just the template. It cuts straight to the point. You just have it like if you're interrogating an NPC or an NPC has information, a section that just says what they know. And I was like, I can't believe I haven't thought of this. This makes so much sense. But then I guess to kind of pivot, and then so as someone who I imagine gets a lot of submissions each time this, I was about to call it the Iron Chef competition.
It feels that way.
Yeah,
it's fun that way for sure.
Yeah, no, it does. Like I said, I think the next time was it live stream it. But I guess so in the sort of submissions you accept. What are some of the things you kind of look out for that allow certain adventures to stand out from others? Because I imagine people listening, they may be adventure writers themselves. They may want to apply. It's little things like that can maybe help them sort of hone their craft. So
different groups that run contests such as this, they're going to do them in different ways. And what matters to some are going to matter differently to others. And I can speak to how we judge, and the things that we look for. And this isn't to lessen or say negative about people who judge and look at different things. because the needs of organizations might be different. The intentions behind organizations might be different as well. The reason why we run the contest the way that we do is we're interested in giving voice to people who might not have otherwise been discovered or given a voice, especially newer writers or people from underrepresented groups with minority voices. And one thing that is true across the individuals that we try to look for is that the experience isn't always there, either because they're new to writing or because in the case of many minority authors, they were never given a chance to write. They were never allowed at the table where that would even be an option. And so we tend to look a lot less at the formality of the writing, at the proofreading of the writing, or how closely they follow the template. We don't weight those judgments because those are things that you learn with experience, right? And we want to give opportunities for people who don't necessarily have experience. So we look for, can you make a good story? Is it compelling? Do the NPCs, do after you read about them, do you become vested in them? Does the story seem entertaining? Does it seem fun? Does it seem meaningful? Those are the things that we try to give weight to. And we figure that if we give individuals a chance to tell a good story, we can figure out a way to work within the format and the rules to make that happen. A lot of people could follow a format. Very few people can tell a really great story, particularly one that has to be encapsulated in a very brief time.
Within an hour. I think, again, as many DMs probably know, running any sort of session to time is a bit of I guess, like a balancing act. Some weeks you have, 20 minutes in, you've won the day. I guess we'll do a shopping, like we'll fill the time with shopping.
Yeah,
and the other end of we've got Keith has to leave in 2 minutes, and the boss that you haven't even found the boss yet. It's and I think as well, obviously in this particular case as well, it's you're asking for pitches and stuff like that, essentially. It's you're not asking for a finished polished product. And I think it's kind of that's the point, is once you sort of bring the thing on, bring the product on, that's when you can sort of go through the iterative process of getting editors involved, getting rid of all my commas.
It's challenge. It can be challenging for our editors. We have amazing editors that help with polishing these products. So a big shout out to Jenny Loveday, to Latia Chakis, who have both helped because there is a certain degree of, okay, you might not have ever done this before, so let's help you understand the format and the polish, and so it's a little bit more challenging with newer authors to do that. So they definitely deserve the props that they get for that, because they are exceptional at what they do.
No, I was going to say it's fascinating, Connor. Thank you for being so candid about this side of convention running, essentially. Just because again, in all my guests, I don't if any other guests have been convention operators, they've kept that quiet, and it's just stuff that unless you're sort of behind the scenes, or I suppose again, you're quite I guess at least with the application, a very open book. None of this was a surprise and stuff like that, but it's just nice to chat about.
We try to operate our event as an open book because it's a charity event, and open books breed comfort. We want people who attend to know that that the money that they're donating to play and in auctions, everything, that's going for a great cause, and that's certainly something that's very near and dear to the heart of all of us that work on that project. But the giving a voice to new authors or to voices from underrepresented communities is a huge passion of mine. being a queer voice in the space, I get it, and I don't live the daily struggles that a person of color might. Even though I'm mixed race myself, I present in a very Caucasian manner, and so I am treated and given privilege as such. We've got wonderful people in our community who just haven't been given a shot, and they deserve it because the diversity of story leads to a better experience for everybody. And so I want to offer a chance for people who might not have had a chance. They should tell their stories too. They deserve a platform. They deserve a stage, because their stories are meaningful and they deserve that. So that's a personal. That's why we built it the way we do. We have a passion for that, for diversity, for inclusion, for equality of voice and equity of voice. So
again, it's a very I was going to say, well, again, it is a noble cause, and it's kind of like the best way to kind of conduct things. And I think with the DMs Guild in particular, with things like the RPG Writer Workshop, you are 100% since starting publishing, you can see this like almost like seasonal influx of new authors, and just the sort of the spectrum of like new voices that come in with adventures that people always like, oh, we don't really want like, you know, these sort of social only adventures, but no, there's people want them. These are adventures that are happening at tables that people thought, oh no, they can't be happening, but they're out there, and it's good that you know these voices are you know getting their chance to shine. And
absolutely, and they should have the chances to tell those stories anywhere. I have repeatedly joked that for many years, any writing that I've done, there is a way to get through the adventure without fighting the whole time, and this is for organized play. Which has gained a reputation or a stereotype for being individuals who are only interested in that mode of play. And my experience is that's not true. If you provide that alternate play experience, there are plenty of people who like it just for the change. You know, it's a breath of fresh air.
And I think was it thankfully the D&D player base of, let's say, the 1990s to now is almost night and day different. It's refreshing. I think is a nice way to put it.
And if there's one thing that I've learned from running the double blind contest that we run also, and this is important for for anybody taking away, when you set all things aside and you just judge on the quality of the story, the diversity comes out. And so you can see by looking at individuals who have won, we have no identifying information. We do not know if our what gender our writers identify with, their racial or ethnic background, religious background, sexual orientation. None of that is asked. You're just a 4-digit number with the quality of the story. And so it is really nice to see that all those other things taken out, diverse stories are better stories, 100% of the way. So I did not review your story, Matthew.
Like I said, so I kind of preface this with it was like early, like I said, early in my career, and again in the sort of reflection and the review of the feedback I got, it's I guess I'm beating around the bush a little bit, but my adventure was rightfully not selected. I should preface this in where it was, and yeah, it's a sort of case of like again. It's as I mentioned, like, from my growth as a creator, rejection. Rejection makes it sound so harsh, as if I was there sobbing. But constructive criticism and stuff like that, it's a stepping stone. It's a point to learn from. And I in hindsight, I probably shouldn't have named one of my characters Matthew Mythby. I didn't do that. I just had that joke in my head, and it's like, you know, like a hamster at a wheel. It's just like raring to go. I had to get that joke out there.
and I was rejected 4 times this year. So I've kept count, mostly because I look back at what I've submitted and try to figure out ways to make it better.
Yeah.
I mean
that's
how you grow.
Yeah.
The best neuroscientific research we have right now when it comes to learning and self-improvement is that your brain actually changes very, very little with success, except that you try to repeat the behavior that got you that success. And sometimes that's a productive response, but oftentimes it's not. Repeating the same thing over and over and over is not a way to be more creative. But the actual learning and improvement happens in failure. When you miss the mark, but you reflect on it and attempt to improve the next time, that's where all growth and ability comes. So if you fail forward, you will certainly end up in a better spot in the end than if you find early success.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very sort of heartfelt message. It's motivation. Yeah, let's go for it.
Fail with panache.
Yeah, fail forward. So actually, I kind of wanted to ask then. So with the D8 Summit, then are we entering? Is it the 3rd, 4th year?
6.
6. Wow. Okay, I really undershot it.
6 years. Yeah, this next year would be our 6th year in operation. It is our we've operated as a charity since the very beginning. So we've always done fundraising. The D8 Summit a few years ago became its own recognized charity.
Fantastic.
So that was the one of the big steps in our evolution because it will help anybody that attends our events. In the United States, laws are such that donating to a recognized charity gets you certain tax benefits. So there's also a certain degree of federal oversight and community oversight for charity organizations, and so getting that out there was important. We wanted people to feel confident that, hey, I'm going to get some great D&D and other games in at the same and supporting new authors but I know that it's also helping the homeless, individuals struggling with suicidal ideation or hunger. Like, we want to make sure that people know that their money is going to just a great cause, whatever it is.
And I imagine with that, then I imagine it's grown year on year.
It's gotten much bigger each year. Even going to our online event, it was bigger for our online event in terms of number of games and length of. Yeah, it gets bigger each year.
No. Again, it's like it is a fantastic cause, and I'll make sure that there's information about the D8 Summit coming in the description and all around. I'm sure. Yeah, it's
appreciated, Mr. Whitby, sincerely.
Well, thank you. No, again, I don't get called Mr. Whitby enough.
I work in a public school. You're going to get it if you're a grown up in this building.
Yeah, no, it's true.
You're in this building.
Yeah, well, I'll take that. No, so I guess again, thank you for that. Like to pivot back to your creative process then, as a whole then. So when it comes to creating anything then, do you have a favorite part of the project and a least favorite part of each project?
So I'm a weirdo, and my favorite part of a project is delving into lore and finding that little hook that's sort of thrown in but hasn't been explored.
Yeah.
I adore that. Some folks are setting light. Some folks are setting heavy. I find that a lot of the stories I enjoy have very rich settings with an established history. And so, there was a mini adventure in season 3 of Adventurers League where the players went to a farm home that became an orphanage of sorts. And there was a woman, a married couple there, and they had never been able to have children of their own. And they took in all these displaced children And then everything started getting weird, and then it was because the demons had come. It was the Rage of Demons storyline,
Okay.
and so the woman, her name is B. She gives birth to sextuplets all of a sudden.
I'm guessing somewhat demonic sextuplets.
And each baby has 6 fingers and 6 toes
Yeah.
on each hand and foot, like just sort of like off that way. And you adventure on that farm for an hour. You fight a gigantic 2-headed red goat, and then you're like, yay, resolution, and you go about your way. An hour later, I'm like, well, let's revisit. Let's just see what happens a few years down the road.
Oh, so yeah, okay, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm like, what happens? And we decided that what happens is a bunch of things inspired by classic horror movies. And so we're talking Jaws, The Omen, the Thing. Oh man!
So each kid is their own horror film.
Yeah, like but the kids just stay together, like from The Shining.
Yeah, that's creepy.
Like there's 2 kids together and they talk in unison, and it's just not right. They look so wholesome, and it's not okay. And so we had a chance to tell that story. That was the Children of Sin storyline that we published for Adventures League. That was a lot of fun. But that's what we do. We pick up those little hooks and then just go have a good time with it.
I mean, yeah, I think I've said this once or twice before, that what I like about the hardcover books and is those hooks that they leave open. Because again, it's that freedom to be like, well, I mean, they haven't said it's not this, and then you can just go wherever. Yeah, you could just have these. What is like they speak in unison? I'm fairly sure there's a name for that, like a group of people who have like a hive mind that allows them to communicate in unison. I don't know it, but I'm just gonna. When you just there's probably a word for that, and chances are, what is it? It probably is like a German word, because
it almost always is when you have those complicated concepts and they have to be embodied in one word. You're right; they're often German. I don't know. I as somebody that works with kids all the time, I will perfectly vouch for they can either be incredibly adorable or creepy at any given time. Like it's the way it goes. So children singing, I can either think it's amazingly like, oh look, it's the music recital for our school, it's great, or oh my goodness, they need to stop singing that song. They're jumping rope, and I'm pretty sure that Freddy's coming out from somewhere.
Yeah, it's nursery rhymes, and like there's you always see that horror trope. It's a little girl singing, or like a group of like children singing nursery rhymes in slightly too slow. That's all it takes. I was like, okay, I don't like this anymore. I don't like it.
Deep delves into lore. That's what I like. That makes me unusual. I really appreciate people that like to come up with just the stuff fresh. So, and I find that refreshing to read, but that's my preferred style of writing, is to stick into an established setting.
Where do you get your lore then from? Is it like, are you like a wiki diver? You're like an old edition? Like, do you, like what? Yeah, where's the lore coming from? What's your source?
This is one of those times I wish like I was at my house, because I've got a room that has become a gaming library.
Like the camera pans on its walls.
Yeah, I can just pan around and show. And here's this bookshelf is just this game sort of stuff. I've been collecting for a lot of years. So gaming has been a passion of mine since before I was a teenager. A strong passion. So I've collected a lot of books. I've had a lot of time to read them and play them and understand them. So that's where a lot of it comes. And I'm not going to lie, Wiki is the bomb for exploring things. And so Forgotten Realms Wiki, I'm talking about you. This is not a paid endorsement, but man, that website is stellar.
I tip my hat at the faceless moderators or contributors to that website who it's the thing with like Wikipedia. It's like, I'm thankful for the people who just work for no pay They just do it for the love of it, and it just makes my life just so much easier.
Oh yeah, so much. I appreciate them too.
So then I guess so the other side of the coin that I did the flipping action, just because the part of the project that maybe isn't as fun as lore diving.
Okay. So my least favorite thing is final approvals, those final editorial oversights and approvals, because you're never quite sure. At that point, the product is no longer yours, right? You've created it. You've put together something you think is great. You're sending it to somebody who is going to cut out the things they don't like.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to maybe subtly change things in the story, and you have no clue how long it's going to take. I've never found that particularly fun. I have a lot of respect for the people that do that. When it comes to Adventurers League, the resource team, they do stellar work with that, especially given the size of the program.
Yeah.
It's a huge job, and they deserve a lot more appreciation than I'm certain they get for taking that on. But it is a painful time as a writer just to send your baby out there. You've poured your heart into it, and you're like, okay, now
your six-fingered, your six-toed baby.
Here you go. Here's my six-toed baby,
Yeah.
And don't.
No, and it for me, it's the same of like when the edits come back as well, and you see that, like, I don't know, in the Google Docs, you have 300 comments or like 300 suggestions, and I think, like, I receive it. And then I think I immediately close it, and I'm like, okay, I will come back to this. Like I can never, like, as soon as I receive the edits, I look at them, and then I can't dive straight in. It's a case of like, this is yes, okay, yes, thank you for sending me my child back. I've seen what you've done with it. I will make the preparations, and I will return tomorrow.
And if the editor's Ginny, 300 of those comments are her waving her fist at me and saying, "Don't put apostrophes in those words, Connor."
So the funny thing that I had the privilege to work with Ginny and Sadie Lowry on Tyke's Torment together, and I not recently discovered, but through the process I realized that even though Ginny wasn't an editor, she would edit my sections a little bit first before they would go to Sadie to go. Again, I have a habit of putting in apostrophes. I kind of write like I talk. So where I think I would pause, I just like slip a comma in there. and yeah, there was a few times where Ginny was like, yeah, no, I cleaned it up a little bit, just a little, and I was like, that's fine. Again, it's all improvements. So I was very thankful to have both of them just help me.
She's a wonderful person to work with. I don't think I've worked with Sadie.
No, if it comes to the legendary M dashes, and I don't know if you don't follow Sadie on Twitter. Recently they've posted like 2 Twitter threads detailing the art that is editing, and Sadie knows. They know their shit. I was gonna self-censor myself, but like it would not do it justice of how much. So yeah, no, hi Sadie. I 10 out of 10 would recommend. But yeah, no, again, so yeah, editors, they are scary, but they're worth it. They're worth the pain.
They are absolutely worth it, for sure. You can see a much better product in the things where I've had an outside editor work on them.
And then I guess that kind of like leans to like my last kind of question about your creative process. And if there's like something that you, over the course of like everything you've done, any lessons that you kind of wish you knew like sooner, the time machine to speak to like a bright-eyed Connor, like, hey, you should.
That's tough. I'm always learning something. Yeah. There's always something more to learn. But if there's one thing that I think I'm still trying to figure out and still trying to learn, sincerely, it's the use of Twitter and the art of self-promotion.
Yeah.
That's something I'm still trying to work out. I haven't figured it out yet. Because it's it's a space with very different social rules than anything I'm used to, as somebody who's always been a little bit awkward socially to begin with, it's challenging. So that's one thing I wish I'd figured out sooner, because maybe I have figured it out by now. But I still have not.
The thing I always come back to is the fact that, depending on like the size of the project and stuff like that, is you are wearing so many hats. Like on a smaller scale project, you consider yourself a designer, a writer, sometimes an editor, an artist, a layout. And there is a reason why people are paid and are hired for marketing. And particularly social media marketing is a whole skill in itself. And I think that's it's easy to sometimes forget that it is a skill to be able to market your stuff online. That it doesn't come naturally to some people, and I think it's something that you work on. And with social media, a good part of it's luck. Like if you post at the right times, you can like be analytical. You can be like, turns out there are the most people awake at 7:22 on a Thursday, and if I post out, it's you could try and like do it as a science, or you could just do what I do and just throw it to the wind and just see what happens.
Yeah. Oh, and you have to be controversial.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Controversial.
Yeah. Again, if you want the clicks, yeah, you be controversial. You let that blow up, and then you post the link to your product that's unrelated. But you go, oh yeah, no, here's my SoundCloud.
And I've spent my entire life trying to fly under the radar. This entire being controversial thing. This is tough. Like
I don't do controversial well, just because I honestly I don't think I do actually have many controversial opinions. I'm as tame as they come. I will roll over at the first sign of conflict. But yeah, no, again, there's people who thrive in that thing, and props to them.
And super props to them, yes, because that's a set of skills too that you just are looking at it and trying to figure it out. And you're like, wow, I've got a lot of catching up to do.
Yeah, I suppose it's the sort of thing of like, again, a good part of it is building a following. If people, and that comes with time,
Yeah.
And and there's a good chance with if you start early on the controversial takes before you have that, you may lose more than you gain. So I think just my advice, and I don't know if it's good or not, is just generally be a decent person, and then once everything's all, then you can start being good. I realize that's not good advice. Don't listen to me. This is So moving on. Segue. Speaking of
Giggle Fest, everybody, listen to two guys giggle for an hour. The podcast.
I mean, like I said, there's some ASMR videos out there that I think fall within the Giggle Fests.
It's all right. I'm enjoying this. This is great.
No, so segue. Professional. Looking to like the kind of the future of the whole, then like I know there's talks about the current CCC system undergoing some changes, but personally, like, do you have like a dream project or like a certain like adventure? Like, what would be like a project that, or like an adventure that you just like you want, maybe not just yet?
Okay. I think. For me, a dream project, if I could just make something, it would be a print book, because I'm rather partial to print. I love PDF, but I'm a very tactile.
Just want to hold it.
I like to hold it. I like engage all the senses there, and it would have to involve. Perhaps a take on fairy tales or delightful magic or youthful whimsy. I would like it to be something that affirms the human spirit, and makes people feel like they experienced something great when they played it. This is something that I've been striving for a lot more in my work. The hope punk Malo. Where you tell stories in RPGs that give people hope about humanity, hope about their personal everyday lives, and just by doing that, it's revolutionary.
Yeah.
right? It's a revolutionary thing to tell stories that make people feel better about their own lives. And
I
so
do
how to do that?
I do like hope punk. It's I've not heard that term before. It's adorable.
Yeah, a friend of mine used it, but I mean, it comes from the mindset that when you create stories that leave people feeling better in their lives as people, where they take something away from the table that reaffirms their own life outside of gaming, that that is kind of revolutionary. A lot of times people just they write for the experience at the table without writing for the people who are experiencing that, knowing that they're going to take it away. But having known so many people, and I don't know if this is your experience too, I want to see stories that people walk away from and they say that there was a story that had an emotional component to them, that touched them on a personal level. I think that's where the space I want to try to write in. So it would be a print book with fairies and something that leaves the player feeling reinvigorated in life.
I mean, no, 100%. Like, so to take off again, to pop on like my academic hat for a second, just because it kind of sits close to like a lot of like the research that I do, is the fact that what you're seeing with video games and media as a whole is a shift from what people kind of consider a like hedonic entertainment, obviously just entertainment for the sake of like fun, laughter, pleasure, those sort of things, and something that I don't think has necessarily been explored with the tabletop RPG space, which is what you're touching on, is the idea of eudaimonic. So thought-provoking, pensive emotions, the things that kind of stay with you, or like transform the situations that allow you to be transformed based on your life reflections. And I think products like that, or like or products that allow people to experience this sort of thing, I think would be like again the kind of next iteration of where adventures can kind of go.
Yeah. And as a therapist, I see that the transformative power of storytelling is there in my practice. We use it on a daily basis. It doesn't look quite the same as a TTRPG yet, but I'm playing around with that to see if I can incorporate that well into my practice. Also, it's that just by sitting around and telling a story, even if that story is, let me know about your life, tell me about your life, tell me how you would handle this differently, pretend to be this person that you live with, and try to be them right now, and tell me how that you think they would think or feel. That's the sort of thing that we do around a table with dice all the time. And those experiences in my office, they're transformational. And I think that done well, I mean, the world is shit right now, right? It really is. I'm not even going to beat around the bush. It's not a very great time. But it doesn't mean that all the good times aren't here, because there's still beauty to be found in it. And it doesn't mean that there aren't things to be hopeful for, because in every movie franchise, you find the greatest hope at times, the greatest darkness. It's always darkest before the dawn. And if we can have a hobby that we like, that we enjoy, that also offers that to the participant, I mean, that's just a dream of mine. But that would be my dream project. I would like to be involved in helping tell stories that do that.
It sounds like a fantastic project. I would have that hardcover in a hobby.
I would too. If somebody else is out there working on that, let me know. I want to see this and buy this.
Yeah, I can't help but think. I feel like my life as a whole may or may not have been improved if it was with dice rolls at every important junction. I don't know. I think there's those locus of control, the tests where you kind of work out. I am very much like I am at the mercy of fate. That's who I am as a person. So in some cases, maybe a dice roll would have been more efficient to get me where I am now. But no, was it kind of looking at the time? We have nattered away an hour.
Cow.
I know it surprises me every time. But I do have just basically some kind of quick questions I kind of want to get in. Is first and foremost, again, you kind of have been like I was about to say raised in the conventions, having contributed and participated in the conventions for so long. And again, writing with the CCC and just everything that you've done, are there like any particular people that you kind of want to shout out that kind of like are like beacons of inspiration to you?
Okay, so there are a number of people that have inspired me, and I would love to shout them out because I try to do it all the time as it is. Somebody we've both worked with, Ginny. Ginny is not only great on projects, but when you're talking about like delightful people, she is a dynamo of energy. My motto for Ginny that I've trademarked is Ginny gets shit done.
Yeah, I'm surprised she doesn't have that on a t-shirt.
Good, with a fox on it.
Yeah.
And she changes the world for the better all the time. Paige Leitman and Ben Heisler are both stellar people, great voices for change in our community, for diversity, but also just great storytellers. Latia Jaquise, she carries herself with just an immense amount of grace, and I'm always inspired by her. Somebody I've never met, Oliver Darkshire. He is not only a phenomenal storyteller, he knows how to push the envelope in the way to make the change that we need, in a way that I greatly respect.
I mean, it wouldn't be an understatement to say that the recent changes to the DMsGuild, I think code of conduct when it comes to art, single-handedly all conducted by Oliver.
He absolutely instigated that, and deserves a lot of credit for it.
Yeah.
I helped with I can't say how much or what because I got NDA'd, but I did help with that project, the rewriting of it, and it was very important for me to see that Oliver's concerns, the concerns that he brought to light, that they are explicitly addressed, so that no creator has to experience something like that, right? Particularly a diverse creator who's just trying to tell a story about their life. Inside the Adventurers League, I've worked a lot with Alan Patrick, who also shares my love for lore.
Yeah.
And I've spoken with him about many a story, because he geeks out about that like I do. Claire Hoffman is a wealth of knowledge, both institutionally and story-wise. And every time I've shared a table with her, I've enjoyed just the conversation about whatever Claire wants to talk about. It's great. So, and there are so many more people. I wish I could just go through.
Yeah, it's a cool question. I know. I like. It's always a case of like, if I ask the question earlier in the podcast, that would just be the whole podcast.
It'd be the whole podcast.
Yeah, which would be a great podcast. It's literally just like, hey, here are some cool people.
No, and we have such our community is beautiful, in that we not only come from all different places, and backgrounds, but the vast majority of us are interested only in lifting each other up, right? And so it's really hard just to say. I wrote 3 lines of names and then got to the bottom of my sheet.
Just names. It's all names.
Of just names.
Yeah.
First names. And I'm trying to remember the last names as I'm talking to you.
Yeah.
Because, there's just so many. I can't speak highly enough of everybody. So if you're listening out in this community, you're the type of people that we need more of.
I mean, I've used this joke in the past before that, like, if people feel like, oh, it's weird that Connor didn't mention me, it's like, chances are I cut. I cut the video. Like, he was just about to say your name and I cut it out because I'm evil.
Why are you so evil?
Yeah, listen. Sometimes you just have to be the bad guy. Speaking of cutting things for time, again, I don't want to eat too much into your afternoon and stuff like that. So I will hit the last question as a 2-parter. Okay. 1, non-NDA projects that you're currently working on, and 2, where's the best ways that people can follow and keep up to date and hear about their releases and whatnot.
Okay. So projects I'm currently working on. I, at this point, believe I only have 1 super secret NDA'd D&D project.
Still exciting,
I will say it's D&D, and I will say it's high profile.
Yeah.
I can say that it is not a hardbound book about fairies that makes people feel better about their lives.
That's the next project. So.
That's the next project. Get on that. I'm finishing up a story called King Obold's Fist. That is an orc-centric adventure that is intended to reframe the view of orcs inside of the organized play setting. Mm-hmm. I am wrapping up my submission to Dark Reflections, which is a retelling of Princess. The fairy tale princess genre. I might have submitted something about Hansel and Gretel. I went right back to the first. Yeah, I am going to be helping with Gary Con Autumn Revel and Gamehole Con Online in November. So if you are a gamer around the world participating in those events, hit me up in the Discord and say hi. I'd love to chat with you. And we're working on, we're going to be starting up planning for next year's D8 Summit charity convention here real soon. So there's a lot going on. Yeah,
it sounds like, again, especially now that you're talking from your office, it sounds like, again, you've got 2 jobs going on. Well, arguably 3. You're a convention running, you're writing content, and also a full-time.
Oh, but each one is a passion project, and I love them. Yeah. And they say that if you love what you do, you don't work a day in your life. Yeah. And I wish my body agreed with that sentiment. I feel great. Yeah. My body just sometimes says no.
I think I don't understand that my body's constant need for sleep. I think it's overrated.
That is downtime. That is efficiency you are losing.
Yeah. No.
Matthew.
I can sleep when I'm dead. On that note, again, Colin, I have to thank you so much for taking the time to have this chit chat. And do you want to shout out your Twitter handle? Obviously, it'll be on screen and stuff like that, but I imagine that's one of the best places to hear about what you're up to.
Yeah, Twitter is a great place to find me. My Twitter handle is @TheHealerDM, capitalize Healer DM, capitalize that as well. You can also find out more about what's happening with D8 Summit Charities by the Twitter handle @D8, the letter D, the number 8, Summit.
And yeah, like I said, so there'll be links and whatnot and everything to the description down below for people curious. But yeah, chances are, I think if they're listening, they should be following you. If not, that should be quickly remedied. But yeah, I guess with that, again, thank you so much, Connor. Or Mr. Self, is that? Oh yeah,
Mr. Whitby, it's been a pleasure with you, also, sir.
I've been Mr. Whitby. You can find me at Whitby Writes. Yeah, because I'm keeping that right. I might change it to at Mr. Whitby Writes.
You should.
But yeah, no, and you can follow me there and all that. My very last question then: how do we end a podcast?
How do we end the podcast?
Yeah.
I think we should end it with a fairy tale ending.
Ooh. With that, what I get arguably happily ever after. I think
We have to find a way to find our happiness. So what right now, Mr. Whitby, would make you happiest?
Jeez. You can tell I'm not mentally prepared for this sort of question. Wow. I think what would make me happy? Why what is this happiness you speak of?
I put you on the spot.
No, you have. You know what would make me? I think what would make me happy is what is it? Seeing my partner. I think I'm gonna go with that. It's a
All right. And so after vanquishing the foe, Mr. Whitby makes his way home to his partner.
Yeah.
Who lovingly looks into Matthew's eyes, and they hold each other's hands. And across the pond, in the middle of a cornfield, Mr. Self finally finishes his long trek home to see a house fully decorated for Halloween.
Oh.
And he gives just the smallest smile at a childhood that he remembers. And they all lived
happily ever after.